pleasure to welcome you on a topic that I'm delighted to see so much interest in, the whole idea of direct democracy. My personal view is there's only, in the absence of direct democracy, as one of the options citizens have, calling what's left democracy is actually stretching the word somewhat. We have at least two people in this gathering here, one of whom is Dennis Beckett and one of whom is our speaker Jim, who's passionate advocates of more intensive forms of democracy. And during the transitional process in South Africa, some of us worked hard to achieve it. And interestingly, one of the protagonists at CODESA of direct democracy was COSATU. I don't know whether they still have that position or anyone interested in advancing it. Our speaker, as you know, is Jim Powell, and I have a 5-page CV for him. So I'll just pick some bits and pieces. His interests are gym, camping, travel, and direct democracy. There you are. So how you do that, I don't know, because presumably when you're traveling and gymming, you can vote on issues. His strengths, he's very modest about these. His strengths are good logical mind, understanding situations, and conclusion of projects. So we hope that direct democracy will be one of those projects which he successfully concludes. His employment, he's been employed some of the big corporations in the world, internationally, Chrysler, Leyland, Consul Glass in South Africa. He's done, most of his work was work or time study there. He's been a teacher. He now markets and produces fuel monitoring systems and builds and sells tree houses. And he runs the on-the-spot radio program. He's got a great interest in political events, runs a website on direct democracy, and I have some of the content of what he'll be saying, but let's look forward to what Jim has to say on the topic, and I'm hoping that he will address how to advance the concept at a time when the obvious best window of opportunity, the transition CODESA, is behind us. That was the time when one had a really good chance of getting, and did get, many checks and balances into the Constitution. This is one of them which unfortunately fairly narrowly missed, and it did have some interesting people, as I say, including COSATU, trying to get it into the Constitution as a constitutionalized aspect of South Africa's democracy. Not having got it, I think, is somewhat sad. We do, of course, have many other checks and balances in our Constitution, which is what leads many constitutional experts to say it's a good Constitution, but it would have been just that little bit better had direct democracy been in it. Jim will also share with us some of the knowledge of how Swiss direct democracy has gone, and that's the country in the world that has most of it and most intensively. Others do have, we've had referenda in South Africa. It's worth remembering that F.W. de Klerk ran a referendum on whether to give up apartheid amongst white voters, and something like 75% voted yes. And that's a little piece of South African history that is very easily forgotten. It was a critical part of the fact that it was abandoned. So Jim, over to you, and welcome him in the appropriate manner.
A little bit more on my history. I came over here in 1975, just before the 76 riots, and I was privileged to actually be in one of those few countries that went through a revolution without going through a full civil war. We know there are plenty of problems that are taking place with this country right now, but we're far better off than we would have been if we hadn't gone through that revolution. One of the things that's missing is really accountability of the politicians, to the voters. And what I want to do is go through our current situation and how we can change it for the benefit of all of us. I don't think many of you would actually agree with that statement. But in practice, it's not true. We know that. But they are actually our employees, and I will go through the logic of that as we go along. Now we take a look at the current system. Can't hear? Okay. Sorry, he's trying to turn the volume up. I'll shout a little more. Okay. The current system is better than pre-1994, but it does lack accountability. You can understand that the allegiance of politicians, particularly the proportional ones, is to their... Is that better?
Yeah.
Right. Is to their political parties. Because the political parties decide who gets employed. We can describe the political parties as labour brokers, because they are going to decide who goes in, and they've got the power to take them out again as well. So why should they actually talk to the ordinary voter when their money, their livelihood, their security is directly away from you to their own party? We do have one section that's got ward councillors, and that is local government. Now the local government, 50% is somebody you will recognise, or most people will recognise, you can go along to and say, you represent this geographic area, and I want you to do something about it. But 50% also is proportional representation. Here's another concept which I'd like you to take on board as well. That each and every one of us who are voters are actually shareholders of SA government, of the province, and also of the local government council that we belong to. That vote gives each one of us a share. And I want you not only to regard yourselves as employers, but also shareholders of each of those institutions. There's a reason why, not just that we choose who actually gets voted, but there's another good reason why we are the employers of the politicians. And that we should be able to control what the politicians are doing. I'm not talking about micromanaging. I'm not talking about saying every single system, be a logjam and nothing would work. Now if we take a look at what I see would be the best combination. Constituencies at all three levels of government, central, provincial and local. But it's slightly different on the proportional representation, where what we would do is we would say this party got 70% of the wards, but they only got 60% of the proportional representation. So they would not get any proportional seats. But a party that got 4% of the proportional representation and none of the wards would get 4%. So you've got somebody to go to at each level of government, and you've got an overall representation of the smaller parties as well. Recall of ward politicians. Now we all know, as far as the voters are concerned, our representatives are untouchable, as far as the voters are concerned. Now the recall, which is present in many places throughout the world, is the ability of the voters to raise a petition and say, we're totally dissatisfied with you, ward councillor, you're out. And we have a by-election because of it. I'm talking about us as voters being able to control the politicians. And referendum with initiative. Now, there's three descriptions of this type of device for voters to be in control. If it's raised by the government, it's a plebiscite. If it's raised by the voters, it's a referendum on current legislation. If there's no legislation in place at all, then what you do is you have an initiative. You actually raise the law, you have a petition, referendum takes place. If it's voted in, it then becomes law, and Parliament can do nothing about it. We're living in a representative democracy. Once every 5 years, they're talking to you right now. They would actually like to have your vote so they can get employed. And then what experience do you have of them actually coming along to you after that? Very little is the experience, unless you belong to a political party. But as an employer and shareholder, they're not interested in you between elections. Then we have direct democracy. Now, this goes back to Greece, where they selected a whole range of people. They took a vote on what was happening, and that became the law. I'm not talking about complete direct democracy. You want to have the politicians there, whether you do or not, I'm not sure, but they're necessary as far as I'm concerned. But if they do something that you don't like, you should have the option to be able to say, here's the petition, have a referendum, this is what's going to happen. Bit of tongue-in-cheek here of democracy versus dictatorship. With democracy, you vote before you get told what to do. With a dictatorship, you don't bother voting. That kind of system could be described as a 5-year dictatorship because of that. Now, let's do a little bit of a role play. I'm the political candidate. You're the voters. I want a job. You're also the taxpayers. And the job I want is as a politician. You will decide who gets employed, even if it's through a political party. Your votes will be counted up, and in accordance with the effect of that vote, people will go into positions within whichever establishment. Currently, in 2014, it's going to be central and provincial. I like this job because I'm actually guaranteed a job for 5 years. Now, it's not a bad contract, that, because it's fairly well paid, and there's other perks there as well. I don't really need any specific skills apart from the fact that the people I choose to be employed with, which is the political party, okay, have just got to like me. Total line for those on top, and that's really what I've got to do. I can ignore you all. Now, how's that for a potential employee speaking to his employers? In fact, I can just simply say, I'm going to ignore you. Nothing you can do about it. I'm a politician. You're going to rely on my goodwill and integrity. Much better than we had, with a long way to go before we get to true freedom. Now, I don't subscribe to the fact that all politicians are bad at all. If it was like that, the country wouldn't run at all. There's lots of politicians who've done a good job, and others who have done a terrible job, and I think in your own mind, you can decide who they are. But you can do nothing about it. You can't control me directly in my party. I might have members of the party, and those members will actually have meetings, they'll make decisions. Often it's been said that the country's been run from the two house by the ANC, rather than being run in Parliament. Maybe I could change the Constitution, but why would I want to? I've got the power. Why would I want to give it to you? I don't have to. You'd like us to listen to you. I can tell you what now, if you're phoned through to a political party now, you're actually going to get people who are going to talk to you. So run up to the elections. As soon as that vote is cast, you know what the effect is, unless you're fairly high up in that political party. Every level of government, that's where you need to have a constituency or a ward, so that there's some sort of person that you can go to say, you have to deal with this at this level of government. Now, this is an interesting one. This is for the full 5 years. I'm going to go through each level of government. Johannesburg Council. This is excluding the perks. 2,100,000 per councillor at the lowest level. That's their income. And would you believe it is a part-time job? officially described as a part-time job. You move up to Gauteng province, an ordinary member of the provincial legislature, 4,350,000, and only slightly higher really for Parliament, as an ordinary member of Parliament. Whether they pitch for work or not, they're still going to get paid. You have no choice in this. I think you all know that. But the important question I've got is, after I've given you this sort of presentation, I've been so arrogant to my potential employers, would any of you employ me? I didn't see any hands raised. And also, would the companies of government survive? Now, you've constantly seen in the papers where this council and that council has been in administration, that a very little council, the mayor's got themselves a £1 million car, that there's lots of corruption. The latest one where they had the riots, where the water wasn't coming in, okay, the mayor, the chief whip, and the speaker have all been recalled because of the indications of corruption. And the story is that they deliberately sabotaged the water system so that one of their friends could get a very lucrative contract for water tankers. Provinces as well have gone under administration, and that is because not only just because of the corruption, but people have been put in place who've got no idea what they're supposed to be doing. Massive bills for consultants. Why have we employed these people when they can't do the job? Why is it you don't have control? Simple answer to that is, we as voters, or you as voters, because I'm the politician, you as voters had no decision in the rules of making the rules for how politicians operate. Now, there is a long road to travel, many steps, so you can actually have some sort of an idea that you're controlling your destination. Oh, sorry. I'd like us all to take that together. And I can't do it by myself. I'm not asking you to join direct democracy. I'd like you to take this concept in line into your minds. You've got the contract which is on the seats there. Take a look at it, knock it around, give it to any candidate who wants to actually get a position, and get them to sign it. This is the way in which we're going to get around it. Before we get into the detail, accountability, accountability, accountability. Political party, turning, I don't turn towards you as a voters, I turn away to my political party, because that is where my security is. It is a 5-year dictatorship. You should have control over your politicians. The law should be passed with you in final control. It's part of the contract that you've actually seen. If you decide to exercise that right. Now, what I'd like to do is go through briefly the extremes of the effects of direct democracy. What I'd say is the worst one is California as a failed state. Now, the United States actually describes a country. So California is actually its own country. And each of the states is its own country, and they've all come together. California had direct democracy. It was supposedly one of the shining examples, but they did two things that would actually destroy it and turn it into a failed state. The first one was that when a referendum was called, they didn't actually check to see if it conflicted with other legislation. It just went through. So we get these conflicts happening all the time, which caused the logjam. And secondly, when they actually voted, they wanted this extra and this extra and this extra. So they voted for all these extras and lower the taxes and lower the taxes and lower the taxes. What's going to happen in the end? It's going to crash. And that's what happened. But it's a good thing that California happened, because we can learn from the mistakes of California and not repeat them. Best known, Switzerland. Of all of the laws that are passed in Switzerland, they go through exactly the same way as we'll go through, say, in this country here. Only 3% of those laws are subject to referendum. So those three, what will happen, let's say it's at a national level, 100,000 signatures are required for a petition. If they meet that criteria, then a referendum is held, the vote takes place, and that is as if it went through Parliament. Politicians can do absolutely nothing about it. And it's not like having a referendum every weekend. They group them together, maybe 3-4 times a year. The people go along to make their votes, and it becomes law. Interesting statistic also is that there's less people voting for their representatives than there is on the referendum. And I went along to Switzerland and I spoke to as many people as possible. But the one thing that stuck in my mind was one comment. It was said, it's very simple. It doesn't really matter that much who we put into represent us. The reason behind it is because we have control. If we want to, if we like what the law says, we leave it alone. If we don't, we raise the petition, and we actually have what we want within our constitution. Let's take a look at what happened when Switzerland was created. Multi-ethnic, multilingual, it was poor, poorly educated. So this thing about needing to have an educated populace to be able to get the benefits of direct democracy doesn't stand. The effect that direct democracy has had there is that it has become one of the safest places in the world, and also one of the highest earning in the world. Now, the Swiss also have a particular attitude towards the overall. They look at the bigger picture. There was a referendum that took place a few years ago to reduce the benefits of the lower paid workers. And traditionally, where there's any votes taking place within, if there's any votes that take place, it's the higher echelon that actually vote and the lower ones that don't. But those of the higher one, middle and higher, who did vote, they voted against this law which would have actually pushed down the lower paid ones. And when they were interviewed, they said it's very simple. If we put these people into a poorer position, it will destabilise our society. So they're able to take a look at the bigger picture, not just for their own narrow self-interest. Before we go off that, Switzerland has got a similar political system to us in its structure. They have a federal government for the whole of Switzerland. They have 20 cantons and 6 half cantons. And in a country of 4 million people, they have almost 3,000 communes. And that's similar to our local councils. But their local councils goes down to 1,000 people. Important thing is that it works. They don't interfere with each other, but they keep it within the rules of the land. You've got a chance now to change it. It's coming up. And you, all of you, can make a difference. And what I'd like you to do is befriend a politician. Make him your mate. Doesn't matter which political party it is. It doesn't matter which level of government it is. Okay? And you all know who they are. The important thing is you tell them what direct democracy is about. Within a political party, it says anarchy, it's mob rule, etc., etc. It isn't. It's your rule. Here's where we start getting into the change. Unless they commit themselves to direct democracy, do not vote for them. Why should you employ somebody who has total control over you? You as a shareholder, you as an employer, why would you do that? The contract which you've got down there, and we'll just go through it line by line, is insist that they sign that document. That document will then be displayed on my website if you want, or anywhere else that you want. The idea behind direct democracy is not imposing from the top down. Is you get an idea, you see it, and you change it. You do the negotiation with these parties and political candidates, and see what they've got to say coming back to get it signed. Because this is the start. This is the start of a long journey that we all need to take. Details of the politician. Recognise that they are an employee. I, as the political candidate, I am your employee. You pay the salaries. An employer pays a salary. You pay that through your taxes. Current system doesn't put you in control. In fact, it pointedly takes you out of control. Regular and effective consultation and communication by various methods. Only vote in accordance with the interests of the community. Now that's a bit of a vague one. If you take a look at the end of this, it actually says that if there's a petition, a referendum, that they will actually follow the result of that, even if their party tells them not to, even if they believe it's not right. If they're given an instruction as an employee, they must follow your instruction. Ensure that the wishes are effectively communicated, and if they see something that their community wants, that they will, most likely through their political structures, put it through to all three levels of government. Total energy, effective and efficient service. Now, I don't think any of us really believe that the majority of our councils in particular, because they're the closest to us, and so we can see what's happening, are effective or efficient. I, as a politician, when I sign this contract, are accountable to the voters only, not to my political party. And that's why the political parties don't want this to be signed, because they will lose control over their political candidates and the members of parliament, etc. This is the recall. Now, a lot of people argue that that's far too low. I've actually taken that to the highest percentage normally that's used in the world. It goes from 12.5% up to a high of 25%. It's very difficult to get a person to publicly put their name on a petition and say, I don't like my councillor or my provincial councillor or my member of parliament, because they see them as having power over them. And it's been found that that is the upper limit that's reasonable. But if your mate that you're going to adopt wants a higher percentage, let's get this journey started. All of the registered voters can sign the petition for the recall, even if they voted in the last elections or not. But one of the important things here is, as well, you don't want to have an election, and it's reasonably close, one person gets in, the other one's really upset, let's say it's 55 to 45%. The other one is really upset because he's lost, he starts a recall petition. You've got to give the person who gets a position a chance to actually do the work, and 6 months, and you can only start a recall petition only 6 months after the vote has taken place. And if an election's taken place during the recall petition, while the signature's been taken, it's cancelled. You got the election, you can recall him if you want at the next election. Promote to all levels of government, direct democracy, recall, referendum, initiative, direct democracy. That's just my details down here for sending the document to. And of course, you do need to have a signature. This is a contract between the voters, okay, and the politician. Now, I've taken this through to a number of legal people. I've told them you're not going to charge me anything for it, but I wanted their opinion on this. And if it actually goes to court, they actually don't know what the answer is, whether it will be enforceable or not. Only way to find out is once it goes to courts. But I want you to consider that this is not just to get a control over the politician, but it's also a marketing exercise to start saying to the general population, there is another way. There is a way in which we as a group can control the politicians. Switzerland has, which is a very stable country, it's got a system of cantons and communes. The cantons, as I said, are like our provinces, going down to very, Zurich is really a canton by itself. But when you go down to the communes, very small, self-contained, boring people, okay? Nothing ever happens. And I can tell you that my time in Switzerland, there was a pub across the road where I was staying at a holiday resort, and there were some plants outside. And I got up in the morning one night and one of the plants had been pulled out. And people were walking past me. Look at this. What is this? What's happening here? Within 2 hours, that plant was back in and everything had been cleaned up. And another example was there was a municipal worker who was just doing the flower bed. And inevitably, when you're digging around, some dirt gets out. So he went off. I thought, well, he's finished. There he was, with his brush and his pan. Every last bit of dirt back into the flower bed. That is something that works, and it works very well. Let communities go together. Why would you want to stop them? This is not apartheid. Apartheid where it was imposed on people. This is allowing people self-determination. Self-sustaining without interfering with other communities. I bet you didn't know that we've actually got communes in South Africa. The more recent ones is the Khoi and the San. Would anybody here know what the name of it is in South Africa? Take a look. It's the tribal homelands. Legislation's in place. It's very well established, these tribal homelands. The problem within those, though, is that there's no voting. It's a complete dictatorship, such as the king or queen. They're just called chiefs. But we're there. They're allowed to take place, and we can allow people, if they want to live amongst their own life. I like living in Joburg where everything's different, but that's my personal choice. But I would support their personal choice to be able to make the decision. Now, important. I think you can see there was not a mention of any political party here. It's not party political. But the important thing is, it's a system. Now, most people when elections come up, they take a look at the players. They don't take a look at the playing field. The playing field is the constitution and the laws and the ability of the politicians to make decisions, and they don't care about us. We don't want to get rid of politicians. Why? We need them to actually go out every day, take a look, have an argument with each other, and come up with things that they feel are good for us. But, like the 3% of the laws being passed in Switzerland, we should have the ability to say, we do not agree with this, this is how it's going to change, and directly control the results. The tragedy of the current system is that people are dying. Recently, with the water shortage, police were killing protesters. I don't know whether it was justified or not, I would think not. Okay? If you had the ability of people to be able to control the resources close to them, you wouldn't have these deaths taking place or the unrest. Now, this isn't just a nice theory of mine, which I'd like everybody to take up with. I have been working on it for a number of years, and I've been going out and speaking to political parties. And these are the parties that actually sign, not the parties themselves, but representatives of the parties. The Freedom Front, Democratic Alliance was two of those, Independent Ratepayers Association of South Africa, and COPE. Okay, I've been in talks with Gauteng, and it's getting on very nicely until I heard yesterday what happened on the radio. So right now I'm still talking to them, see if I can get in through COPE to the Democratic Alliance, because normally the way to get direct democracy into a country historically is through the opposition. But the Democratic Alliance has not been interested in direct democracy. There is an acceptance small number of politicians for accountability. Now, you're needed to make this grow. I would hope you would take this idea away with you tonight and start working and saying, why, instead of why bother voting, why should I vote for you if I say to them, I will vote, but I won't vote for you unless you're going to be controlled by your employers and shareholders. And what I'd like you to do, each one of you, flex your wings and become the eagles of freedom. And accepting what I've given to you tonight. Become an eagle. Spread your wings of freedom. Spread the message. You will create eggs. Those eggs will become eagles and go further afield. You won't have any control over them. You don't want to have control over them because they're going to be spreading a message, a universal message, that the employers of the politicians are going to be in charge. Let's hope there's a massive flock of eagles. Oops, sorry, let me go back there. Let's all try to fly to freedom. I'd like you to act today. You're going to get the rewards, all of us, collectively, as a society, as South Africa. It's going to help us to go further forward so that our country becomes so much better than it is, and so much better than it is right now today. That's on the document you've got, and let's leave you with that thought.